understand what the content and the storytelling is organically that gets people to convert. So we did not spend $1 on paid media for the first 6 weeks that Lively was launched because we did not want to spend money on something that wasn't proven. And so I always tell people to think about what were brands doing before Facebook.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Female Founder World. I'm your host, Jasmine, and today I'm speaking with Michelle Cordeiro Grant. She is the founder of Lively. Michelle, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to dig into everything that you're doing at Lively and how you got your business off the ground.
Amazing. I'm so excited to be here. And like I was saying, this is going to be the best part of my day. I just know.
I love that. I love being that for you. So I want to jump right into it because there's so much stuff that I want to cover with you. But you're someone who, you had a career in corporate America for a solid decade before you made the switch to startup life. And, that's something a question that I get from people all the time is, how do I know when to make that switch? How do I make the switch? What can I expect? Like it's definitely a hurdle that I think a lot of people face that's kind of stopping them from going to the next step and doing what they really want. So I'd love to know, where were you in your life and what propelled you to make that switch to the world of startups?
Yeah, I was in my young 30s, so I didn't make the leap as early as people often do now. But I was at the point in my life where I had just gotten married, and I was looking at my leaders and my female bosses and mentors, and I saw them having amazing careers, but I also saw that their personal lives were not equally as amazing. And I knew I loved my job so much that I was going to be going down that road. And so for me, it was really about a life choice where career, I was the girl skipping to work. I loved going to work and I loved it so much. I knew it was going to be at the sacrifice of children and relationships and family. Also, I just felt like, what was the worst that could happen? I finally gained confidence in my life. And it was really until my late 20s that I felt really secure with myself and my abilities that I realized that I can come back to corporate America. I can come back to a role somewhere within this community. It may be 5 steps back, but I can build myself back to where I am at that point.
Yeah, that what you were saying before really resonates with me. I think, when I was working as an editor and in digital publishing, I'd look at the women who were a couple of steps ahead of me and in the roles of editor-in-chief and publisher and that kind of thing. And I was like, I don't want that. And I don't know where else there is to go in this industry and in this space if I'm not doing that. And that's why I originally left to freelance and then start my own business. So that definitely resonates. So how did you actually make that switch from working in a really traditional corporate job into going into startups? Did you go and work in a startup first, or did Lively come to you and you jumped right in?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first, it wasn't like, I'm so bold, I'm quitting my job. I started to become unhappy in my job and I wasn't excited about the promotional opportunities and like where I was going. So there was a level of frustration brewing within me, just to really be tactical and honest. I would say also, I felt like the organization wasn't as fun for me anymore either. So I just wanted like people to know there usually is some type of propelling issue. Someone gets fired, like a lot of entrepreneurs got fired and like figured out startup was the next step. For me, I was just like, I'm not skipping as well as I used to anymore. Something needs to change. And I'm not a risk taker by nature. So the next step for me was like, what is this other world of startup? And I went and worked for a startup for 3 years. But that was only because I started just networking and asking people like, what's startup life like? What's it like to work at a startup? Yeah. So none of this was like planned, I guess is my point. It was all just a series of events of curiosity.
How did you find the switch when you finally, got a job at a startup and coming from a more corporate role? What was that like for you?
I'm giggling because my first startup job was at Thrillist Media Group, and I was working on a flash sale company called Jack Threads, which was led by a founder from Columbus, Ohio. We were selling streetwear and amazing menswear via the flash sale craze that was going on at the time. And so it was mostly like men and amazing women who were from like Brooklyn and Soho. And here comes Michelle, like clicking in her stilettos from, the Upper West End, Midtown of Victoria's Secret, wearing like form fitted dresses and jewelry and makeup.
I love it.
Oh my God. I was just like click, clack, click, clack, click, clack throughout the office for the first 2 weeks. I'm like, wow, I do not fit in here. Um, and then I was also trying to take what I learned and change that culture to mimic what I was coming from. So I was like asking people to have Monday meetings and early Tuesday AM meetings. And these people are like, who is this person? And what is she talking about meeting at 9 AM on a Tuesday? Like, we're just getting our matcha. What's going on? So I would say the transition was harsh. Like I was in culture shock at first.
Once you spend a little bit of time working in that kind of startup environment, I'd love to understand what was the story about how Lively came about? Where did you get the idea? What were you seeing happening in the market that made you think that there was space for a business like this?
Yeah. So, when I joined that startup, this was the early days of Facebook. Facebook was in beta, and I was at a startup that we were acquiring customers for like $1.50. It was crazy. It was like crazy times. You were just making it rain if you were on Facebook and you had a product. And so I got to really learn about how you can acquire customers digitally and have these like content stories and really talk to audience in mass and really reach and resonate wide across America and globally. And so that really stuck with me. And then I realized, a couple of years into it, I'm like, I miss brand. Like brand is what drew me to New York, and what drew me into this industry was storytelling and brand and creating impact emotionally with people. And so after, almost 3 years, I got itchy, as I do. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to go out on my own. I now know what I want my company to stand for and what I don't want to do and what I do want to do. And that was really build a brand and build a brand retention first. That was really about community and impact and price and sale and all of that stuff, the flash world and like everything I learned in corporate America about markdowns and discounts, I wanted no part of. So it was really just another YOLO in Michelle's crazy mind where I'm like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? I get to do this for like 2 to 3 years before it implodes. Statistically, it takes 2 to 3 years for a company to go to zero, 60% of the time. Let's just see.
Awesome. How did you okay, so like getting really tactical and tangible, what are the things that you did to get the idea off the ground? What were some of those first steps that you took to make Lively a business?
Yeah. So I was backwards. I was lucky enough to find an investor and a manufacturer before Lively even had a name. Again, not a risk taker. So needed like a financial structure and backbone to get the product up and running. That was number one. But once everything was secured, the week of my 35th birthday, I went to work on Brand X. And there was two really important tactical things that I did in the beginning that I would tell everyone to do. Number one, if you're a sole founder, write a list of everything that you're terrified of and like you don't know anything about, and be like really honest with yourself. And my list was really long. Like I didn't know anything about fulfillment, customer service, digital marketing. I was starting a digital company. I didn't even know how to use Google Analytics, Facebook, none of it. I'm still not on Facebook. So made that list and then literally started to draw like a spider web of everybody I knew connected to those areas and just started calling them and emailing them and like literally just meeting them for coffees and juices and workouts and building this almost support group, informal advisory group of people I knew I could call on when I was moving into those vulnerable areas. So that would be number one. Number two is I built a board in my office and my workspace like it was this next gen company. Like it looked like this company already existed. I had like a really pretty plant. I had a watercolor painting that I had someone just like paint for free and then like framed it at Blick. I made everything look smoke and mirrors like we were a full functioning company, so that when I was recruiting and trying to convince people to leave their jobs or freelance or participate with me, it felt legitimate, and it felt legitimate for me. And I know I said I would share two things, but the third thing is also really important and exists today is I have a three-dimensional mood board of what I wanted my brand to look like and feel like. Because we do a lot of talking as humans, but we're three-dimensional. And so having a brand, you have to be three-dimensional in how you articulate it and how people absorb it. So that's where I started.
Yeah, interesting. I think, what you've said here about recruiting other people into your network and into your web and then using those relationships to be able to grow and grow your company and also grow your own skills as a founder, I think is really important. I think too many people are nervous about letting anyone know about their idea before they launch, or they feel embarrassed about saying that they want something that they think is a little bit odd or unusual, wanting to go out there and start something on their own. Whereas you can't get anywhere if you're just sitting at home by yourself, talking to absolutely no one.
Oh my gosh, I had this PowerPoint it's the most embarrassing little deck that I had, and I had printouts of it, and I would literally meet with people in Bryant Park, in Brooklyn, and everywhere, and just walk them through this deck. I remember meeting with my friend Jessie. If you asked her to this day, she probably thought I was bananas when I was walking her through my big idea. And I'm like, this is going to be huge. And look how amazing this is. But it wasn't really about, like, Jessie had nothing to do with the business or where I was going from a business perspective. She was just one more person that I could exercise and like say it out loud to and would listen. And as when you have an idea that you're excited about, tell everyone you know and do it over and over and over again, because your story gets more and more massaged and more succinct and more real for you and for also investors, employees, other people that you want to bring in. So yeah, like I told everybody about Lively. I had no shame at all. And literally people would come to our house for dinner and I would bring them into like a room and be like, so check this out. And they're like, what?
Oh,
What
I
are you
love
talking
that.
about?
No, that's awesome. I love that. I honestly think it's so important to be able to have those conversations. And it just also becomes more real for you as well when you're speaking with other people about it. And once it's out there in the world, you are not going to flake on yourself, because you do not want to let yourself and all of these people down that you've told that you're going to do this. You're going to hold yourself to account.
Totally. No backsies.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you used focus groups a lot early on to help kind of shape what the company looks like and what your product looks like. Can you talk people through that who maybe haven't gone through that process before? What kind of information were you getting through these focus groups, and how did you kind of, logistically organize them and host them?
Yeah. So it started with that vulnerable list. I was on LinkedIn and I was reaching out to marketers and anyone that worked for brands that I thought did a very good job early on. So like Nasty Gal was on my list from the early days of when Sophia was building that. Net-a-Porter. There was just like a whole list of people. And I came across this amazing woman, Nicole Williams, on LinkedIn, and I asked her if she would want to like consult for me and help me like function almost like a CMO, part-time freelance and so forth. And she came on board. And I said to her, I was like, I really want to know what people think. I want America and the women to make the decisions for me. Let's figure out how to do that. And so she literally just did like 2 degrees of separation. Because I was like, I don't want them to know I'm the founder. I don't want any friends or family. I'm not going to get like the truth there. Let's just bring women of all different types, business, moms, athletes, etc. And it was as simple as we would rent out an Airbnb space, get like a dozen women, bribe them with like wine and cheese. And also you get to be a part of building brand X. And as soon as it launches, you will be there to launch with us. Women were psyched. They were pumped to come out on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday night. And she moderated it for me and basically was like, okay, what do you guys think of this image? Write it down on a Post-it note as soon as it hits the coffee table. What do you think of these taglines? What's your favorite word? And so we orchestrated this whole system of gaining feedback with data. So then that way it wasn't about the outliers in a focus group, because when you have a focus group, there's like one person that takes the megaphone and really becomes the outlier. And you don't want to create a brand on the outlier. You want to create a brand on the data. And so for anyone that has a focus group, make sure that it's not just about open conversation. It's about collecting pieces of information where people are writing things down and have this like personal space to really express themselves that's not influenced by what others are saying.
Do you remember how many women you would have spoken to early on?
I would say we probably had 4 focus groups, so maybe 50 to 60 women overall. And then we also did Google surveys after that. And then we took the results of all of that feedback and narrowed it down to the image, the tagline, and the copy.
Amazing. Yeah, really smart.
I was going to say, be prepared to get your heart broken, because if you sit in on these focus groups like I did, some people were just like brutal, like, what is this? Like, this is terrible. Where's this hook and eye from? Michael's? Like, you're just, oh, okay.
Stab in the heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about customer acquisition specifically. You spoke about, that time when Facebook was, paid ads on Facebook was a really affordable way to get new customers. And that is not so much the case anymore. Where do you think new founders should be spending their marketing money right now? 2021, 2022, where should we be going?
Well, first, the strategy I use with Lively, I would still stick with, which is understand what the content and the storytelling is organically that gets people to convert. So we did not spend $1 on paid media for the first 6 weeks that Lively was launched, because we did not want to spend money on something that wasn't proven. And so I always tell people to think about, what were brands doing before Facebook? They were relying on grassroots marketing, right? Which was slow and steady. And then they were also trying to figure out where the biggest billboards in the world were. I mean, Instagram is the biggest billboard today, fact. And so there is still a place for Instagram and Facebook in a marginalized way. But what are the other attributes of your ecosystem that will support an efficient play there? And that is, building a list to drive email and text is the most important thing for a brand that wants to be around for the long term. Like, owning your customer list is where I tell people to always start. And that is, that's the thing that put Lively on the map. Is we launched with 130,000 emails by doing a refer a friend campaign a month before we launched. So think about ways to build your list. Other places I would spend money on is still in partnership with other brands that you want to hang with, right? Because you are who you hang out with. And in my opinion, we went and did things with like The Sill and SoulCycle and different places that we knew our customer already was. And then the last thing that I would say is, think about where to spend money physically. We did a lot of rev shares before we had our first store. We would go to landlords and say, hey, like, Kendra Scott's leaving this space. She's moving across the street to a bigger space. Could we use this space and give you a % of the revenue that we make here? And we'll drive traffic and do all sorts of amazing things. Now you have a place that's functioning as a billboard where you can get some activation that'll drive social media, and you can learn about your customer firsthand. So it's a lot of sweat equity in the beginning. It's a lot of just, you're hauling racks and stuff and talking in person a lot. But let me tell you, you learn so much about who your customer actually is, and then you spend the money.
That's great advice. And I know that folks who are listening will be thinking, hold up, you launched with a list of 130,000 people. How did you do that? So let's back up to that point. I know I've heard you speak about this before and the strategy that you used here, but for anyone who is wondering how on earth you pulled that off, could you give some insight into that strategy?
Yeah, I mean, look, Guy Raz always says how much was luck and how much was strategy. This was definitely like 30% strategy, 70% luck, because it was lightning. But Harry's, the razor company, in 2011 did their refer a friend campaign, got 100,000 emails, and open sourced the code that they did this with. So we took that open source code in 2016, built our refer a friend campaign, which felt like this: a splash page introducing Lively that said, inspired by wild hearts and boss brains, join the movement. earn free points towards your first purchase. No information about product, no prices, nothing. And it was just literally a dashboard that you would get as a user that says, I got Jasmine and Sophie and 3 other people to join Lively. I now have 3 points. And I got 6 more people. Now I'm at 9 points. And 3 points gets me this, dollars worth of credit. 9 points gets me that. We emailed 250 people on a Friday. We did not factor in link in bio, which was not around in 2011, but was around in 2016. And I mean, our goal was 5,000 emails a week. And by the next morning, we had 1,000, 5,000 by breakfast, 50,000 by happy hour, because we're like, what is happening? 90,000 that night. And it was literally about the right content going out to the right people at the right time. And I don't know who on that 250 person list was the lightning, but it went from Midtown Manhattan all the way to Australia. Australia was 40% of that list.
Wow.
Through Russia, through Asia, through England, through the West Coast. I mean, we had 280,000 unique sessions, which is unique IP, we'll call them humans, that hit our splash page and eventually give us, 133,000 emails. And so what do you do with that? You turn on your customer service and you ask them why. We had nothing to sell at that point. We just needed to know what and why.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That is, yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like that's a dream for anyone who's got an idea and they're working on a company and they're like, who am I going to launch this to and how am I going to launch it? That's a really, really clever idea. I wanted to fast forward. So we've spoken a lot about launch days and getting things off the ground, which is a lot of people listening are in that stage now. But I think to really help validate all of that awesome advice that you've just given, we need to fast forward and let people know where the company is at right now, because you have taken this from that 250 person email list to a really impressive acquisition earlier this year. And I was hoping you could let people know about that.
Yeah. So we launched Lively our first product was sold in April of 2016. Our community launched in January of 16. And we were acquired actually in July of 2019, which feels like yesterday, but apparently it's been a couple of years.
2020 feels like about 10 years, to be honest.
Yeah. And that was not the plan, to be honest. We were building, I always tell people, don't build your company for the exit, build your company for the long term. And when you do that and you're focused, all of a sudden, which is what happened to us, someone just walked into our office and said, hey, this company wants to buy you. They've been following you for 1.5 2 years. They were at your store opening. It's like, you don't know who's watching and who's like really paying attention. And it's wild. Someone literally was like, hey, we see this opportunity and this is going to really complement, our family. And that was Wacoal, an intimates leader based out of Japan. They're public in Japan with a huge arm in the North American space. And they were like, hey, our culture is beauty and balance. And we see Lively and we see how Lively's growing. And that's very different from how we build and grow. But at the heart, we are aligned. And I went through this whole journey of like, do I sell my company? And who are these people? And like, what does it even mean to sell your company? And 6 months later, we were acquired for over $100 million.
Incredible. Congratulations. That is, wow, how impressive. And what does that mean for you once your company is acquired? How does your day-to-day change, or what shifts in the business?
Yeah, I mean, we were very fortunate that we were acquired by a company that values how we exist today. And so they've been so welcoming, but also allowed us to, continue the journey that we were on. So I'm still CEO and operating the company. But now I have this big sister who has given us the foundation to do things we would never be able to do the way that we do today. Like we launched in Target during the pandemic. We have 4 brick and mortar stores across the country. We're able to beta, ways that we weren't able to because I was constantly looking at cash flow and fundraising and like, do I hire a human or do I beta? And our options just grew. And I just say now I can sleep at night and know that Lively is going to exist well beyond me. But it's a very lonely feeling as a founder, to be really, really honest, because this baby that you built out of like notes in my iPhone running through Central Park went to college after 3 years, basically. It's like they left the house. I don't really need you that much. Like, I'll be back to visit. And so you now, and I say to people, I need Lively more than Lively needs me.
Mm. Michelle, the last thing that I ask everyone who comes on the show is to share a resource. It could be a book or a podcast, a community that you're part of, something that's helped you grow yourself and grow your company.
So I'll give you a community. I'm obsessed with the Female Founder Collective. It's been incredible for new female founders, especially. The network is engaging and the tools are incredible. The book is an old book, but it's called The Blue Ocean Strategy. And fundamentally, it teaches you that you do not have to create something from scratch or be the one to invent. You need to be the one that figures out the new way to do it. And that's what Lively is we took a category, bras, lingerie, dated, dusty, women loathed, into something that feels great, incredible, exciting, fun. And so really digest that book because it's brilliant. It shows you that the world is so full of possibilities and it's not about competition and room. It's about pivots and open-mindedness and just, if you don't like the way the world is, then change it.
And on that note, thank you so much for coming on the show, Michelle. And thank you for being so forthcoming and open with all of your tips and learnings. It has been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of Female Founder World. I hope you enjoyed it. And just a reminder that if you did, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to podcasts.